Let's talk further about the overall crisis between the U.S. and Iran and President Trump's decision-making with Assal Rad, a research fellow with the National Iranian American Council. Assal, are you concerned President Trump apparently came this close to a deadly escalation of tensions with Iran?
Of course, that's something that is concerning for our organization as well as Iranian Americans and, of course, Americans, because it's not something that the American populace wants. It's clear that President Trump was in fact able to win an election on a platform that was against endless wars, that was against the Iraq War. He calls the Iraq War a disaster, and so it's important to realize that any kind of conflict with Iran would be exponentially more challenging, more difficult, and have more blowback than what we saw in Iraq. So it's certainly concerning, but I would say that we are very happy that President Trump has shown restraint, and we call on both sides to show restraint and not escalate this conflict any further.
But on the other side, I mean, what do you make of the initial salvo in all this, which was Iran's shooting down of an American spy drone? Iran says it was in Iranian airspace. The U.S. says it was in international airspace. Either way, it was an aggressive act, right?
I think it's important to understand the act within a larger context of what we've seen. So if we have a crisis that's been manufactured by the Trump administration. First of all, in terms of the dispute, it's important that we have all of the evidence before we draw conclusions, right? This is the case of anything. We presume innocence before guilt. We don't want to create a conflict that can escalate into a war because we are assuming things without having full evidence. Calling it an act of aggression on the Iranian side fails to really acknowledge the fact that the Iranian side has been sort of the victim of U.S. aggression. If you look at economic sanctions, if you look at the fact that Iran has complied with the JCPOA, and it's the United States that has pulled out of the JCPOA more than a year ago and has put brutal sanctions on Iran that are affecting ordinary Iranians every day, I think that context informs what's happening more than simply saying it's an act of aggression. Again, the drone, we're discussing the drone in terms of was it in international water or was it in Iran, or was it in international airspace or was it in Iranian airspace? And the reality of it is, it was wherever you look at it, even if you agree with the U.S. side, it was very, very close to Iranian airspace, or it was in Iranian airspace. So to say it's an act of aggression on the Iranian side when you have drones flying around their airspace, I think is a little misleading.
But is this a war game? And if it is, who wins?
No one. And that's to call it a war game is interesting because neither side wants a war. The Iranian side has made it clear that they do not want a war. And I think that President Trump has made it clear that he doesn't want a war. That's why he showed the restraint that he did. The incoherence of President Trump's,
Well, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we have to leave it there. We're out of time. But interesting discussion. We'll see what develops. Assal Rad, a research fellow with the National Iranian American Council. Thanks for being here.